Housekeeping, Mary.
He said I just wanted to have I didn't put it quite like that.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jan Conley, and I'm your worship associate this morning. And we're at the place I like to call my second home, First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm so glad you're all here, including those online, because you are the spiritual community and social activist I treasure. I truly look forward to every Sunday morning because of how the services and the quality of our conversations feed my soul and my mind, and sometimes my body. Because, like today, we're going to have our usual monthly potluck. Whether you brought food or you didn't, I hope you choose to stay and break bread together right after the service in the room across from the lobby in our main entrance area. I'm really thrilled to see new faces among the regulars because I know we have something special to offer, namely that our church is a place where you are free to be you. It doesn't matter where you are on your spiritual journey. We say, bring your questioning mind. It doesn't matter whom you love or what your sexual orientation is. We say, bring your expansive heart and join ours. The color of your skin, your age, your socioeconomic status doesn't matter here. Bring your entire self to this exceptional community. Be sure to read the announcements and the inserts in today's order of service, where you can find important information about accommodations in our building and the upcoming programs and events. The flowers today are given by Ginny and Fritz Casey-Leininger, who, in honor of their daughters, Katie and Sue Casey-Leininger, who turned 40 a few days ago. and in honor of the strong, smart, and loving women they have become, which is in no small part, they say, due to their religious education and mentoring by our First Church community. Just a moment. Before we begin our service today, let's wave to the people who are watching from home and then exchange a warm welcome with each other and listen for the chime to bring you back to order again. Barbara asked me to announce that 2 weeks from today will be our congregational meeting. And so be sure to attend because we will be voting on our new board members. All right. So today, the chalice will be lit by Dwayne Smith. If you would come forward. Come, enter this beloved community. Let its spirit fill your soul. Let its fellowship bring you comfort. Let yourself rest in this sacred space and time. Take refuge here. Grow here. Be challenged here. Enter this beloved community. Today, as in every month, for the first Sunday in the month, we pass the physical and virtual plate in support of a worthy cause. And today, it's actually very close to home. First Church's Social Justice Fund. Here to explain the purpose of this month's Share the Plate is one of our church's most active social justice leaders, Dan Schneider.
Better, thank you. Good morning. Last Sunday, we listened to talk from this podium, from this area right here, about kindness. Today, I want to talk about something closely related, generosity. Our Share the Plate offering for the month of May will go to the Social Justice Fund of our church, and we ask you to be generous in your support. Our generosity can spread kindness and love all around us. Over the last few years, the Social Justice Fund has supported a number of organizations based on need. Through your generosity and giving to the Social Justice Fund, you allowed our social justice team to support You the Vote and to add to the special plate collections throughout the year. In addition, we contributed to other organizations suggested by our members. The social justice team anticipates continuing what we have done in the past, selecting worthy recipients based on need. The difference for the coming year is that there are so many changes happening in our nation right now. It is extremely difficult to predict where the greatest needs might be. Reductions proposed or already enacted in federal support for individuals who have needs and for organizations that help to meet human needs will influence the decisions we make. In fact, we anticipate that needs for services and assistance will be much greater than normal in the coming year. And every day seems to bring a new need to our attention. As we aspire to be a beloved community, we believe in our Unitarian Universalist values centered in love. Generosity is one of those values. And we continue to believe in what we used to call the second principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I can't think of a more important time in the life of our nation and our city for us to practice generosity. If there was ever a time to be generous, now is the time.
So we're going to take a minute, and the ushers are going to pass the plates for our Share the Plate. While they do that, actually, this is a good opportunity to remind you all something we haven't reminded you in a while. There is a collection box in the back of the sanctuary on a table, and that collection box has envelopes on it. And so you are able on any Sunday morning, either before or after the service, to choose to make a donation to either the church in general or to Share the Plate or for a special cause just by placing a donation in the collection box at the back of the church. Just make sure you write on the envelope what your intention is for your contribution. So our next hymn, I'm going to explain it just briefly. It's divided into two parts, a male part and a female part. Number 368, I think it is. Do I have that right? Now let us sing. I love this hymn. I especially love it when we sing our parts properly. Because if you don't, it's kind of like, it meanders through, but if you hit it right, man, the parts just flow together so well. So if you're unfamiliar with this hymn, at the lower line is, now let us sing, 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 sing. You hear that? Now let us sing, 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 sing. Now let us sing, sing, sing. That's the guy's part. And up above, sing to the power of the faith within. Sing to the power of the faith within, lift up your voice. So that's the ladies' part. Okay, close enough? We're going to sing all 4 verses. The words for the following 3 verses are at the bottom of the page. And if this is new to you or it takes you a verse to get in the rhythm, that's fine. We'll call the first one practice, and then we'll roll right into number 2. So if you would, please rise as you are able. Thank you for subbing today. You are a joy to be around, and we appreciate your musical talents. So let's join together in a moment of silent meditation, which I will mark off by striking the singing bowl, and then we will also end after a couple of minutes by me striking the singing bowl. What a perfect piece for a day like today. That was so beautiful. I never bring this out ahead of time because I don't want to block the folks on YouTube with stuff. So you got to give me a minute. All right, folks, I'm looking at front rows again. The only person going home with 5 stars today is Larry. What is it about churches and front rows, or sometimes the front 2 rows or the front 3 rows? When I was an intern many moons ago in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Ken Pfeiffer was my mentor. That guy had some sermon chops, man. People showed up to listen to him preach. And he was so good, he could stand in front of the congregation before he started his sermon and say, "I am not beginning this sermon until the front row is full." And people would migrate from the back and they'd fill up the front row. And I thought, that's pretty impressive. Do I have the chops to pull that off? Or I could say, we're not going to potluck until we fill the front row. You don't have to move. But he would do that every time, and people just started sitting in the front row. Oh, now I got to start handing out more stars. All right, Yvonne. All right. Is that because I have sermon chops or because you want potluck? You're polite. Oh, wow. Ellen and Michael.
The best seat I could see easily.
Awesome.
Since I'm short, I couldn't see over the top of it.
Yeah, now I know what it is. Most of us are pretty old, so we got to sit way back to see, because if we sit too close, we can't see. As you can tell, I'm a bit punchy this morning, but that's all right. On a dreary day like this, we can use a little levity. So today is on friendship. And I've been pondering friendship a lot lately because there are certain words that just kind of stick in my craw. If I fall over today, it'll be our comedic moment. There are just certain words that stick in my craw, and friendship is one of them because I think we use it too lightly. And in fact, I've actually offended some people. Somebody came to me a while ago, not too long ago, and said, "Oh, I spoke to a friend of yours who said blah, 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 blah." And I said, based on the blah, 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 which I didn't really resonate with about myself, I said, "Oh, that's not a friend so much as an acquaintance." Because it was an acquaintance. It wasn't somebody who knew me well enough to give information out about me. So I tend to be pretty specific and intentional with my words most of the time, and sometimes I will use the word acquaintance, or I am acquainted with, versus this person that I've met twice for 5 minutes is my friend, And in fact, I think on Facebook we should have friends and acquaintances and ran into you in the grocery store once kind of categories so that we could be more specific. But friendship is a word we just toss around a lot, and I think it's a really important word because it points to an important life experience that we need. I feel this way about the word God. People throw that word around easily. I feel that way about the word spirituality, which is, I think, a word that has been co-opted from the traditions out of which it arose, and it's now used in psychological terms. Sometimes people will say, "That was very spiritual." And I think to myself, no, that was very emotional. And emotional is not spiritual. So anyway, I've got these certain sets of words. Justice is another one that kind of float around in my head that I think we should be more careful and intentional about those. And today, it's friendship. And so I've pondered a lot of thinkers about friendship. in the last couple of weeks as I've thought about today's sermon. And Emerson took me this way, and Cicero took me this way, and Montaigne took me this way, Seneca took me this way. And as I thought about how to craft a sermon out of all these, I thought, I don't know if this is going to be very linear, because they all had very different thoughts about friendship and all quite meaningful. So today is sort of a combination of things. I'm going to throw out some thoughts about friendship from different thinkers, but it may not be so linear at times. I may just muse on these thoughts for a few minutes, but there is sort of like a central theme in my sermon that I do want to get across. So today you can sort of think of this as a combination of a slow spoken meditation with a little bit of reflection and silence, sort of sandwiching a central message that I'll get more focused and linear on toward the middle of the sermon. And then hopefully that will be grist for your mill. You'll have a thought to go home and cut the carrots by. As Ken Pfeiffer again used to say, my mentor, which just means I hope there's something in the sermon that you're still thinking about by this afternoon. Otherwise, I have failed at my task. All right, so I'm going to do a little Emerson, start off, because Emerson actually wrote about friendship. And when I read this, I thought, okay, at least Emerson and I feel the same way, and that's not bad company. Emerson said, I hate the prostitution of the name friendship to signify modish and worldly alliances. I hate the prostitution of the name friendship to signify modish and worldly alliances. Which I think calls us to really ponder what we mean when we use the term. I think Emerson agrees that we use it far too freely and without much definition or depth of meaning. And Emerson actually wrote that in his essay entitled, can you guess? Friendship. Not a very original thinker. Actually he was. Not a very original essay titleist. But philosophers aren't very good at being creative and pithy thinkers. Cicero wrote on friendship, and the title of his essay was On Friendship. Montaigne wrote on friendship, and the title of Montaigne's essay was Of Friendship. You get the drift? Philosophers are not very creative. Seneca wrote a somewhat lengthier title, but equally debilitated. His essay was On Philosophy and Friendship. So as you can see, philosophers aren't the most creative folks in the world. However, when you dig into these essays, there are some real nuggets of wisdom. I actually think it would have been good for Emerson to have had a publicist. Do you know, I once read an article 10 years ago or so that talked about book sales. And if you insert the word soul into your title, you'll sell many more books than titles without the word soul. So Emerson should have added like the word soul or spirit or heart, some such thing like that, to his essay, and come up with something like, you tell me, I think this is a better title than friendship. What if he titled his essay, Commingled Spirits? Ooh, would you buy that one over friendship? If you were in the bookstore, okay, you might like this one. How about this one? The romantics among us are like, ooh, that one's good. And the non-romantics are like, no, friendship works. Here's one here's what I would title my essay on friendship if I had the bandwidth to write it. Where souls intertwine and hearts lie embrace. Is that too sappy? Do you love that? Way too sappy? But I think if Emerson had done something like that, he might have landed on Oprah's Book of the Month Club at some point, you know. But from Emerson, we just get friendship. All right, so enough prelude. Let's get into some thought. So in his essay, Friendship, Emerson wrote, "Every person alone is sincere. At the entrance of a second person, hypocrisy begins." And like, we could end the sermon there, right? Every person alone is sincere. At the entrance of a second person, hypocrisy begins. And with so much of Emerson, there are just so many singular lines that stop me in my tracks. And I can just sit with this for a long time and discern his meaning. And so where I went with this, just, a little footnote to let you know what I did with this. I thought to myself, what he's telling us there is that there is a cost to human connection the vast majority of the time. And the cost of human connection is some degree of self-alienation. So, in my private space, I can sit with my own heart and my own mind and let me be who and what I am in that private space. And there's deep authenticity there for all of us. But the encounter with another automatically brings a calculation, does it not? Can I really share my heart of hearts with this person? Can I really share my inmost thoughts with this person? And often we calculate whether or not we can do that, because I think what's going on there is the desire for human connection is so important to us that we're willing to set aside the truth of who we are, at least to some degree, in order for the connection to work. I think that's what Emerson's getting at, and I think he's largely accurate on that point, which is why this topic of friendship is so important. True friendship, and we'll get into this in just a bit, I think is a very rare connection with another human being where you can share your heart of hearts and your inmost thoughts. And I think that's a very rare experience in today's world. When I run across people who I think have this capacity, I cherish them. I absolutely cherish such people. Seneca wrote, "Truly, the one who does not love his own soul will not be able to love the soul of another." The one who does not love his own soul will not be able to love the soul of another. And I think that Seneca is getting to something incredibly deep and truthful as well. We struggle, I think, to love ourselves enough. We're too hard on the scoundrel within us, right? Remember almost 2 years ago when I arrived, I talked about how the fact that we're all scoundrels, but none of us are to blame. We're just to recognize the scoundrel within us and get on with the work of becoming more sensational scoundrels. Thank you, Ramona Beck. You can say amen and hallelujah louder than that. Yeah, all right. And we're too hard on ourselves, but my Enneagram teacher, Helen Palmer, used to say, what we do to ourselves, we do to others. So if we're hard on ourselves, we're going to be hard on others. So in order to be material for a deep, true, abiding relationship, friendship with somebody, we have to love ourselves first and foremost. And this is a much harder struggle or task than I think we tend to recognize. And a quote I read from Carl Jung many moons ago got to the heart of this. And so Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." Whether we accept ourselves or not has a deep effect on our outlook on life. And Jung is saying self-acceptance is a problem. That I feed the hungry, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least among them all, the poorest of all the beggars, the most impudent of all the offenders, the very enemy himself, that these are not without, but within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved. What then? What then? As a rule, the Christian's attitude is then reversed. There is no longer any question of love or long-suffering when it comes to ourselves. We say to the brother within us, "Raka," and we condemn and rage against ourselves. And raka is an Arabic term of condemnation of another. So we're very hard on ourselves, says Jung. And we need to come to accept ourselves. And it's only when we do that that we understand Seneca. Truly, the one who does not love his own self will not be able to love the soul of another. Isn't this deep stuff this morning? Yeah. So here's the part of the sermon where it's like, I'm going to get a bit more linear. And of all the philosophers I've read on friendship, Cicero is the one who speaks most to the way I feel and think about friendship. Cicero wrote, "There is nothing so worthy of love as virtue. Nothing so worthy of love as virtue. Indeed," he says, "it is hard to keep up a friendship if one has deserted virtue's camp." I think Cicero is spot on. And the reason I think he's spot on is that virtue is not an egoic, but a spiritual trait. It's a spiritual trait, virtue. And friendship in its truest form, in my world, is spiritual. It's a connection beyond the egoic with another person. You could say it's a connection through the transcendent virtues. But before exploring that, I'm going to set a context. So when I read this, I thought, well, that's spiritual friendship. And then I thought, that's a high calling to be capable of spiritual friendship. Like, what other kind of friendships are there? And so I spent a little time on Google this week, and I came up with a couple I'm going to toss out by way of contrast to spiritual friendship. One phrase I found was worldly friendship. And the description of worldly friendship placed great emphasis on things like wealth, power, status, material possession. In other words, worldly friendships are friendships in pursuit of hedonistic satisfaction. And these are the kind of friendships where you're friends with me as long as you are a means to me getting my hedonistic desires met. In other words, these friendships, in my vernacular, take place at the level of the agenda of instinctual gratification. You know, that sounds very base and not really like it would even qualify as a category of friendship, but if you stop and think about the trajectory of your life and the people you've known in your life, I bet all of us can identify some of these scoundrels in the history of our friendships. And these types of friendships are frail and unreliable. As soon as the friendship no longer brings the other person what they want out of their connection with us, the friendship ends. And we left abandoned and befuddled. So if you've ever had an abrupt end to a friendship that you didn't quite understand, it's probably because you were in a worldly friendship and the person with whom you were quote-unquote friends reached a point where you were no longer a means to that person's ends. And they moved on to the next person. Then I found this phrase, utilitarian friendship. So if we wanted to make a hierarchy of friendships, for me to go worldly friendship, utilitarian friendship, and then spiritual friendship. So a utilitarian friendship is a friendship in which both people are getting something out of it that they want. So it's not just one person using the other as a means to their hedonistic ends. It's a somewhat more mature relationship where there's a win-win scenario here. There's a cost-benefit analysis being done on the part of both people in which there's mutual gain. And I tend to think of that as probably the most common kind of friendship we have. And oddly, so I've warned you a few times, don't dip too deep into my psyche because it can get really weird in here. And where my mind went with this was to vampire bats. I know. So vampire bats actually are fascinating to me because vampire bats are very utilitarian. They exhibit utilitarian friendship. And I mean, unless you're like me and you have the luxury of sitting down and studying vampire bats for a few hours, you're not going to know this. So here's something you can take home today to cut the carrots by. Vampire bats are very good at what evolutionary biologists call reciprocal altruism. And to me, that's kind of what utilitarian friendships are. They're a form of reciprocal altruism. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And that can work for a long time and be a very pleasurable, meaningful, and rewarding connection to someone. Well, here's how vampire bats do it. I might tank my sermon with this metaphor, but you'll remember it. So vampire bats, when they eat, they literally eat the blood of their victims, if they kill a mouse or whatever, and they gorge the blood out of the victim, right? And that's where they get a lot of their sustenance. And vampire bats tend to exist in colonies, and so they'll go back to the colony, and if they encounter another vampire bat who hasn't had a successful hunt, they will literally regurgitate the blood from their victim into the mouth and stomach of the vampire bat who didn't have a successful hunt. So they feed the other. You can think of mothers and baby birds like this, except it's not reciprocal. With vampire bats, it's, from human standards, a little gross, but they basically regurgitate blood into each other. And this is how they help one another survive. And the thing about it is, a vampire bat who has given a meal of blood to another vampire bat to help it live, if the other vampire bat at some point reciprocates, that becomes another bat within the colony with whom this becomes a common behavior. So much so that if another bat reciprocates the blood meal, but the kin of the bat who offered the blood meal doesn't reciprocate to the bat offering the blood meal, that bat will ignore its kin and direct itself toward the bat who will reciprocate. So reciprocative, somebody help me. Elocution lessons in the back of the sanctuary following the surface. Reciprocal, thank you. Reciprocal altruism works this way, and it works this way across species, and it works this way with other human beings. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I scratch your back, and you'll scratch mine. I scratch your back, you didn't scratch my back. It's okay. I scratch your back. You didn't scratch my back again. I've been busy. Okay. I'll scratch your back. I'll scratch your back. There's no excuse this time. I'm done scratching your back. Right? That's how relationships work. There needs to be a cost-benefit dynamic that's rewarding to both people. That's reciprocal altruism, and it is the basis of utilitarian friendship. And I think if you think about the friendships in your life, you will be able to see that that is the basis of most of your friendships. I do protest. I love my friends. I know you do. And you think that's the basis of your friendships. But when they stop scratching your back long enough, I think you're not going to love them quite so much. The ego must have its due, right? Okay. There's the cynical part of me this morning. All right, back to Cicero, spiritual friendships. There is nothing so worthy of love as virtue. It is hard to keep up a friendship if one has deserted virtue's camp, as I've said. When I read that, I thought, I have found a soulmate. Because what I look for in people is virtue. I look for virtue. What are the virtues you carry into relationship with other people? And are they good and noble and reliable? And I try to carry virtues into my relationships with other people, which is why sometimes, in friendships, if you got a real one, if you've got a spiritual friendship, they can be hard. And it's hard to find people who want a virtuous friendship with you, because sometimes in a virtuous friendship, you got to think about things like honesty and truth as meaningful virtues we carry into our relationships. And man, if you think about your friendships, there are times where I'd rather tell a little white lie than be really truthful here. I'd rather skirt the issue than be totally honest. And that makes the connection easier, but that's not rooted in virtue. So I really admire and cherish people who show up with virtues, and it's constant work and intentionality for me to remember part of the value in these really meaningful friendships is the license for the virtues to be dominant. And so those are incredibly rewarding friendships. You think about worldly friendships or utilitarian friendships. In my language, those take place on the egoic plane. Right? They're all ego-driven. Virtue or spiritual friendship doesn't take place on the egoic plane. It's transcendent. It's not rooted in your instinctual nature or your emotional nature or even your mind. These are inherent values that we all aspire to and hold. And when you find somebody who holds those virtues, those values, and they abide by them and they live by them in a consistent way, you have what I call existential fixity in the other person. They're going to be good as gold from one day to the next. and those friendships are not going to wax and wane like worldly friendships or utilitarian friendships. When I thought of this, I decided I'm going to take Emerson to task today a little bit. So think about existential fixity. It's nice, like when you see somebody from moment to moment, day to day, week to week, month to month, that you know what you've got. It reminds me of when I lived in Cambridge. I was lucky enough to meet Yo-Yo Ma once through a friend of his, and I heard him say, I like people who are like Snickers bars. The thing about a Snickers bar is no matter where you cut it, you know exactly what you're going to get. I like that metaphor. That's good. So existential fixity, reliability in a friend who operates from virtues that are rock solid is so important. But Emerson, the scoundrel, said, plug your ears, Phil, if you don't want to hear this. Phil is one of our Emerson scholars. In his essay, I think this one was Self-Reliance, speak what you think today in hard words. And tomorrow, speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words yet again, though it contradict everything you said today. Now, I read that and I'm like, I don't know what Waldo I'm going to be having tea with tomorrow. There's a virtue in being true to yourself, but there's a lack of existential fixity that he's counseling here that I might find a little dubious. So I just thought I'd throw that out as grist for a mill. Let me pull us to a close here. All right. One more thought. Again, Cicero. On the theme of virtuous friendship again. Not nearly so many people want actually to be possessed of virtue as to appear to be possessed of it. Repeat that, yeah. Not nearly so many people want actually to be possessed of virtue as to appear to be possessed of it. And I think I've got more, but I think we're going to end on that thought, because I think your laughter tells me there's an ouch under that for y'all, isn't there? Do we possess virtue, or do we just want to appear to be possessed of it? And maybe that's our takeaway today, in more general terms. Ask yourself today, think about what I've said about friendship, and ask yourself, am I the type of person with whom somebody could have a spiritual friendship? Or do I operate in a utilitarian or worldly way with my friends? And when you think about entering into friendships with other people, we should be asking ourselves, is this other scoundrel the type of person who's capable of a spiritual friendship? Before we give ourselves over to another friend. All right. Oh, let's end with this. Let's end with some humor, okay? Now we're going to do two more. Keep the food warm. Alex is on a roll. I'm feeling it. I don't know if you're all feeling it, but I'm feeling it. I want to share two more with you. They'll be quick. Cicero said, you'll like this. I think you'll like this. Nothing in creation is more unbearable than an imbecile blessed by fortune. Wasn't that worth putting off the potatoes for a few minutes? Nothing in creation is more unbearable than an imbecile blessed by fortune. There is some sound advice for determining friendship. But this one is the one that struck me to the core. And I've actually read Montaigne back in divinity school. I have carried this thought with me since divinity school, because to me, when I read this, I'm like, that's a friend. That's a friend. And so Montaigne was doing the eulogy at the death of a very close friend of his. And in the eulogy, Montaigne said, if you press me to tell you why I loved him, I feel that this cannot be expressed except by answering, because it was he, because it was I. because it was he, because it was I. May we all find one or two or three such friends. Thank you for listening. Our last hymn is, what is it? 131, which is called Love Will Guide Us. Thank you. I always need a little help. If you would please rise as you are able. Sing Love Will Guide Us together.
Please be seated. For the closing words, I brought two sets of words with me today, and I thought I'd just let my instinct, my gut, tell me which one to read. And when I'm reading this, if you would come up, Scott, to extinguish the chalice. This kind of touches on, Dwayne, I'm sorry. This touches on a lot of the things that Alex talked about. And when he talked about naming that these philosophers that he spoke from and about today named their essays poorly. This is a quote, or a poem by Maya Angelou, and you would think this isn't about friendship because it's called Alone. But to me, it is the summary of why we need friends. Lying, thinking last night how to find my soul a home, where water is not thirsty and bread loaf is not stone. I came upon one thing, and I don't believe I'm wrong, that nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone. Nobody but nobody can make it out here alone. There are some millionaires with money they can't use. Their wives run around like banshees. Their children sing the blues. They've got expensive doctors to cure their hearts of stone. But nobody, nobody can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone, nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. Now, if you listen closely, storm clouds are gathering. The wind is going to blow. The race of man is suffering, and I can hear the moan. 'Cause nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone. Nobody but nobody can make it out here alone.